Imagine a world entirely different from everything we know. A place where all our familiar concepts of life are turned upside down. In this world, humans, both men and women, didn't just live for a few decades, but for centuries, accumulating knowledge and experience over unimaginably long periods. This was the antediluvian world, a mysterious and captivating era in which humanity reached levels of civilization that are difficult for us to comprehend today. What would it be like to live in such a time? That question opens the door to a journey of discovery into a distant and forgotten past. The Bible describes this as a period of remarkable human development, far beyond what we typically imagine of a primitive society. Skills like agriculture, metallurgy, music, and architecture were not merely early steps of mankind, but represented astonishing technological achievements for their time. Think about it. How could ancient communities build majestic cities, craft sophisticated musical instruments like Jubal's harp, or forge metal tools that, in many ways, still impress us today? These feats are evidence of a civilization far more advanced than history often tells. The extraordinary longevity of people during that time was a key factor in this incredible progress. Imagine Methuselah, who lived nearly 1,000 years, passing down his experiences through dozens of generations. Elders like him were not only living witnesses of history, but also living libraries of knowledge, helping humanity build a rich and complex society. The cross-generational exchange of wisdom over centuries created a unique culture in which knowledge was continuously inherited and developed. But this also raises the question, was such longevity always a blessing? Because alongside those dazzling achievements, a shadow was quietly growing at the heart of the antediluvian world. As technology and culture flourished, moral decay crept in like an incurable disease. The Bible says, "The wickedness of man was great in the earth, and every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." But what does that really mean? Had humanity, in its pride, turned its back on the very values that once upheld society? Or was it that figures like Cain, the first to shed blood, had planted the seeds of a generation that slowly lost all compassion? The story becomes even more compelling when we ask, what pushed such a promising world to the brink of destruction? What kinds of behaviors led God, the Creator, to look upon his work with deep regret? Perhaps it was insatiable greed, indifference to others' suffering, or unchecked desires that corrupted the human soul. That world, which seemed to be a paradise of knowledge and creativity, was in fact digging its own path toward destruction. So what was it like to live in a society that morally bankrupt? Imagine a place where the talents of Lamech, who fashioned weapons, were no longer used to protect, but to conquer, where the music of Jubal no longer praised, but became a tool of decadence. It was a world where humans had everything, knowledge, time, power, but lost themselves in the process. And in the end, when darkness consumed all, God made the decision to wipe it clean, leaving us today with unanswered questions. What truly happened? And what can we learn from the fall of such a once glorious age? When we look back at the world before the Great Flood, a haunting question arises in our minds. Are we, today, repeating the footsteps of that long-lost era? The stories from that distant age are not merely faded memories, but warnings, glimpses into the reasons why humanity had to face such a dramatic restart. But the journey did not end there. What happened after the great deluge, and how, amidst the chaos, could a man like Noah find favor in the eyes of God? Imagine living for nearly a millennium, Not a brief 80 or 100 years, but 900 years or more, with the opportunity to learn, experience, and build a life far beyond what we can conceive today. In the antediluvian world, this was not a dream, but a reality. Figures like Methuselah, who lived to 969 years, or Noah, who reached 950, are vivid testaments to the extraordinary lifespans of humanity at the time. They were not just individuals, but towering trees of wisdom, witnessing centuries unfold before their eyes. But why did they live so long? And how did that affect their world? Let us step into this story to find out. With lifespans stretching across centuries, generational gaps vanished. Grandparents, great-grandparents, and even ancient ancestors lived alongside their descendants, sharing experiences and wisdom accumulated over time. Picture Noah listening to tales from his forefathers, then passing them down to his children, creating a continuous, unbroken chain of knowledge. The result? Skills like Cain's agriculture, Tubal-Cain's metallurgy, and Noah's shipbuilding evolved rapidly, transforming an ancient society into a remarkable civilization. Ideas that might take us a lifetime to master today were honed over hundreds of years back then. But it wasn't all light. Longevity, too, was a double-edged sword. A long life offered not only the chance to cultivate goodness, but also fertile ground for evil to thrive. Think of Lamech, a proud and violent figure who left a dark stain on his lineage. When humans have centuries to nurture vice, the corruption of their souls doesn't stop at one generation. It spreads across many. The longer the time, the deeper the darkness. And these escalating wrongs led humanity to the brink of destruction. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live that long? Would we use the time to build a better world? Or would we become arrogant, believing ourselves invincible? Perhaps the people of that age, with lifespans beyond imagination, gradually forgot the meaning of humility and responsibility. They lived as if tomorrow were infinite, unaware that how they used their time was shaping their destiny. Then came the flood, and everything changed. Human lifespan was drastically reduced, from centuries to mere decades. Was this God's way of setting boundaries, not only to protect humanity from itself, but to remind us that time is a precious gift meant to be cherished? This shift wasn't just a historical event. It was part of a grand design to restore order amid chaos. From Noah's story, we see a flicker of hope, a new beginning, where humanity was given a chance to live differently. So what does that say about our future today? Can we learn something from those ancient footsteps to guide our path forward? The extraordinary lifespans of the pre-flood world are more than a curious detail of history. They open a doorway into a mysterious era where humanity reached astonishing heights, yet fell into profound moral decline. It was a time that not only shaped the past, but also reflected the monumental decisions of God in his relationship with mankind. And then, amidst those ancient pages of history, they appear. The Nephilim, mysterious figures who continue to spark endless debates among scholars, theologians, and researchers to this day. Who were they, these heroes of old, men of renown, mentioned in the Bible? Were they legends or reality? Let us step into the story to explore what kind of mark these giants left on the antediluvian world. According to the Bible, the Nephilim were born from a strange union between the sons of God and the daughters of men. This cryptic description has given rise to countless questions. Who were the sons of God? Were they fallen angels, as some believe, who abandoned the heavenly realm in pursuit of earthly desires? Or were they descendants of a special lineage, perhaps the children of Seth, imbued with extraordinary strength? Whatever the case, their appearance was not without purpose. But what was that purpose? The Nephilim were not merely physical giants. They were influential figures who shaped the culture, technology, and even the morality of their age. Imagine a world where such beings, with power and intellect far beyond the average human, led society. But the question is, where did they lead it? The Bible suggests that the presence of the Nephilim accelerated moral decay, like wind fanning the flames of chaos, pushing the world to a state that God could no longer tolerate. Strangely, their traces didn't vanish entirely after the flood. Consider Goliath, the giant slain by David centuries later, or the other giants who lived in the land of Canaan. How could that be? Some believe a few Nephilim survived the great deluge, while others suggest similar unions occurred again after the flood. Either way, their shadow seems to linger in history, an unsolved riddle woven through time. So what do the Nephilim truly represent? Could they be a symbol of pride, of humanity, or angelic beings daring to cross sacred boundaries? Or are they a living warning of the price paid when mankind pursues power without regard for consequences? Think of Tubal-Cain, a master of metallurgy, or other figures of that era. Their talents were gifts, but when combined with the ambition of the Nephilim, they may have become the source of destruction. The Nephilim are echoes from an ancient world where the boundary between the supernatural and the natural was thinner than ever before. They are not just characters in a story. They are clues that lead us into the deep mysteries of the past. But what made them part of humanity's greater tragedy? Imagine the heart of God, the Creator who formed all things, including humankind, whom he once called very good. Now he watches his creation sink into sin and ruin. The Bible says, "The Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him in his heart." This was not mere disappointment. It was a deep sorrow. But what had gone so terribly wrong? Was it the pride of the Nephilim, combined with humanity's greed and violence, that turned the world into a place so corrupted that even the Almighty had to turn away? This story is not just history. It is an invitation to reflect on ourselves today. God's decision to send the Great Flood was not a rash act of anger or an impulsive outburst from above. It was a judgment deeply considered, steeped in justice and mercy, a blend of his holiness and profound love for humanity. The world at that time had sunk into corruption, where violence and sin crept into every corner of life. But God did not rush to destroy. He waited patiently, giving mankind ample time to change. And it was during that waiting period that the story of Noah and the ark began to unfold, raising a captivating question. What did the people around him do while Noah tirelessly built that massive vessel? Decades passed. With every strike of Noah's hammer, a living warning echoed through the air, an urgent call of what was to come, yet also a testament to the mercy still available. The ark was not merely a construction, it was an invitation, an opportunity for humanity to find a way out. Yet no one seemed to care. Have you ever wondered what went through their minds? Did they laugh at Noah, calling him a madman? Did they ignore the clear signs in front of them? Or did they believe they had all the time in the world to change? Amidst the chaos and moral decay, God still found a glimmer of hope. Noah, a man the Bible describes as righteous and blameless among his generation. He wasn't perfect, but his faith and obedience made him a beacon in the darkness. Imagine being Noah, chosen to carry out a divine mission, to build an ark, not just to save your family, but to preserve life for the entire world. How would you feel bearing that immense responsibility in a society falling apart? The Great Flood was not the end. It was a new beginning. God did not merely judge. He also opened a path for humanity to start anew. Yet it also served as a sobering reminder that every choice we make carries consequences. His patience is limitless, but that does not mean he will tolerate sin forever. As the floodwaters approached, the question lingered. If you had lived in that moment, would you have listened or turned away, believing things would always stay the same? Put yourself in Noah's place for a moment. He lived in a world drowning in violence and depravity, where moral values had collapsed. Then one day, God spoke to him, entrusting him with an unprecedented task: build a massive ark on dry land. What would you do if you were him? Would you doubt, argue, or quietly obey, as Noah did? That obedience changed the course of history, making him the central figure in humanity's rebirth. The ark was no trivial project. God gave Noah precise instructions. From its immense dimensions, about 135 meters long, 22 meters wide, 13 meters high, to the use of cypress wood coated with pitch inside and out. It was an engineering marvel, a floating fortress designed to withstand the overwhelming force of the floodwaters. Imagine Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, laboring for decades, under the curious and even mocking eyes of the people around them. Can you imagine the whispers? Look at that old fool, building that ridiculous thing in the middle of nowhere. Perhaps they laughed. Perhaps they questioned his sanity. But Noah did not waver. He carried a steadfast faith, trusting completely in God's promise. Every plank raised, every layer of pitch applied, was another step forward in a journey of salvation. Despite the apathy surrounding him, the ark was more than a vessel. It was a symbol of grace amid judgment. Each hammer blow did more than construct a shelter. It sounded a warning of the day the waters would rise. For Noah, it was an act of faith. For the others, it was the final opportunity, one they let slip away. This story is not just history. It is a call for us to reflect, to ask ourselves, today, are we listening to the hammer strikes of warning in our own lives? Have you ever wondered how Noah and his family could possibly prepare for such a monumental task? Imagine this: gathering hundreds of animal species, storing enough food for all of them, and ensuring the ark was ready to face an unprecedented flood. It was a challenge beyond imagination, yet behind every detail was the guiding hand of God, providing strength, wisdom, and everything necessary for Noah to fulfill his mission. The story of the ark is not merely a technical marvel. It is a profound lesson in obedience. For Noah, obedience was anything but easy. He faced doubt, mockery, and countless unanswered questions. Yet he walked in faith, trusting God's plan even when he could not see the full picture. And that raises a question for us today. Do we have the courage to obey, even when the world around us thinks we're going against the tide? At last, the ark was complete, ready for the fateful moment. And then the day came. Dark clouds gathered across the sky, a phenomenon unseen in the antediluvian world. The first raindrops fell, followed by the roar of subterranean waters bursting forth, turning the earth into a boundless ocean. The Great Flood had begun, marking a turning point in the destiny of humankind and the planet itself. Imagine the chaos. Those who had once mocked Noah now fled in terror, desperately seeking shelter as waters surged through the land. Proud mountains were submerged, forests vanished beneath the waves, and cities that once symbolized human achievement became mere memories. This was no ordinary flood. It was a global catastrophe that shook the very foundations of the earth. Inside the ark, Noah and his family, his wife, his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives, were safe. But life aboard was far from easy. They had to care for hundreds of animals, from tiny sparrows to mighty elephants, all within a confined space. Can you imagine that pressure? The roaring of wild beasts, the raging waters outside, and eventually a haunting silence as the world outside disappeared. The Great Flood was not just a display of God's power, but the execution of divine justice. It was a fulfilled warning, yet also a testimony that even in judgment, there is hope. The ark floated like a lighthouse of grace, preserving life in the midst of wrath. Rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights, but the story didn't end there. The waters covered the earth for another 150 days, turning the world into a vast and endless ocean. Have you ever considered what it felt like to live in a world so completely transformed? A stillness settled, as though creation itself held its breath, waiting to be reborn. The Great Flood closed one era and opened a new chapter. As the waters receded, Noah and his family prepared to step into a world that was no longer the same. Yet amid the ruins, one promise remained. God had not abandoned humanity. That promise would be sealed with a sign we still look upon today: the rainbow, a symbol of divine mercy. This story invites us to look inward. How do we respond to the warnings in our lives? Are we prepared to face great changes, or will we be like those in Noah's day, indifferent until it's too late? The ark came to rest and a new chapter was about to begin. But what awaited Noah when he stepped outside? After many months adrift, the ark finally came to rest on Mount Ararat. Imagine that moment. No birdsong, no wind, no trace of the civilization that once was. Only the emptiness of a world awaiting renewal. As Noah stepped out, he faced a land raw and untouched, a feeling both awe-inspiring and sacred. The process didn't happen overnight. Noah released a raven, which flew back and forth. Then he released a dove, but it too returned, finding no place to rest. Can you feel the anticipation in each of those days? Waiting for a sign, hoping for a new beginning. Then finally, the miraculous moment arrived. The dove returned, holding an olive leaf in its beak, a sign that life was returning. God called Noah and his family to step out of the ark. It was a solemn moment, marking the beginning of a new covenant between God and humankind. A new world stretched before them, filled with hope and a promise that from the ashes, life would once again take root. When Noah and his family stepped out of the ark, they were met with a completely new world, yet one that felt strangely empty. Everything had to be rebuilt from the ground up. Homes, communities, and even a new way of life. But before they began any work, Noah did something deeply meaningful. He built an altar and offered sacrifices to the Lord. That simple act was not just an expression of gratitude, it was a gesture of reverence, and a declaration that the new beginning would be rooted in connection with the Creator. It was at that very altar that a sacred moment unfolded. God established an eternal covenant, not only with Noah and his family, but with all of creation. The sign of that promise was the rainbow, a radiant symbol in the sky, a reminder that he would never again destroy the earth with a flood. Have you ever gazed at a rainbow and reflected on its deeper meaning? It is more than just a beautiful natural phenomenon. It is God's signature of grace amid humanity's failures. Along with this covenant, God entrusted Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, with a new mission: to restore the earth, care for it, and live in obedience to his will. But this time, everything was different. Humanity now carried the memory of the Great Flood, a living lesson about the consequences of sin and the importance of walking in harmony with the Creator. Imagine being Noah, standing on that barren land, bearing the responsibility of shaping the future. Where would you begin when everything had to be started from zero? This story compels us to ask, if we were given a second chance, what would we do with it? Would we cherish the new beginnings life gives us, or repeat the mistakes of the past? For Noah, this new world was not just an empty land. It was an opportunity to build a legacy grounded in faith and obedience. But his journey, and that of his family, was only beginning, and what they did next would shape the course of human history. The Great Flood was not merely a catastrophe that ended an era. It was a story filled with timeless lessons, still echoing to this day. Imagine standing at a distance, watching Noah's Ark float upon raging waters as the antediluvian world slowly faded into oblivion. What does that image tell us about the seriousness of sin, the patience of God, and the hope embedded in his redemptive plan? The first lesson is clear. Sin is never harmless. The world before the flood had sunk into moral decay, where violence and rebellion against God had become the norm. Think of figures like Lamech, who boasted of his cruelty, or the Nephilim, symbols of ambition without restraint. God's holiness could not tolerate evil forever, and the flood was the fulfillment of justice, not due to a lack of patience, but because humanity had deliberately turned away from the goodness he offered. But the story doesn't end with judgment. Amid the flood, Noah's Ark stood firm, a beacon of hope, carrying the promise of a brighter tomorrow. As the waters receded and the rainbow appeared, God showed that he had not abandoned mankind. For every generation after Noah, we are reminded that though humanity may be frail, God's faithfulness never fails. So today, what will you do with the lesson of the Ark? Will you live differently, honoring the covenant God has made? Or will you let the warnings of the past drift away unnoticed? The answer lies in your hands, just as it did in Noah's, when he stepped into a brand new world. Have you ever considered that the things we do, whether small or great, whether alone or together, can create ripples that affect the world around us? The story of the Great Flood is not just a historical event, but a mirror reflecting the power of human action and choice. Amidst God's righteousness, we clearly see his patience and grace. He did not hastily unleash the flood, but gave humanity decades to change. During all those years, Noah labored to build the ark. Each strike of his hammer was more than just the sound of wood and nails. It was a silent call, an invitation for humanity to return. Imagine Noah, day after day, working under the mocking eyes of his peers, while God waited with hope that someone would listen. This shows that God did not desire destruction. He always offered a path to salvation. And that same patience wasn't just for Noah's time, it remains today, as God gives us time to reconsider the path we've chosen. So, what are you doing with that gift of time? Are we treasuring the opportunity to live differently? Another profound lesson from this story is the power of obedience and faith. Noah, in a world that ridiculed his mission, chose to trust God. He built a massive ark without knowing when the flood would come, or if everything would truly happen as God said. Think about that. A man standing firm in a sea of doubt, relying solely on faith in the Creator. Have you ever felt called to walk by faith, even when the destination is unclear? Would you dare to move forward, even when you feel as alone as Noah? Then came the Great Flood, a moment of transformation. After the devastating waters receded, a promise was made. When the rainbow appeared in the sky, it wasn't just a beautiful phenomenon. It was a sign of hope, a divine commitment that God would never again destroy the earth with a flood. Picture Noah looking up at that first rainbow, feeling comforted in a world freshly washed clean. That promise still holds power today, reminding us that no matter how chaotic life may become, there is always a new beginning waiting. The flood was not merely a story of cleansing. It is a testament to God's redemptive plan. He entrusted Noah and his family, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, with the mission to rebuild the world, carrying the hard-earned lessons of the past in their hearts. These lessons transcend time, calling to us today. Reflect on your choices, treasure His patience, live a life of obedience to the Creator's will. But this story also poses a poignant question. What are we doing with the second chances God gives us? For Noah, it was the opportunity to begin anew on fresh ground. For us, it might be found in the ordinary moments. A new day, a new decision. The Great Flood reminds us that life is precious, that every moment is a gift, and that God's plan always leans toward renewal, not destruction. Therefore, the story does not end in ruin. It opens a new chapter. From Noah's Ark to the rainbow in the sky, it is a declaration of God's righteousness, His mercy, and His invitation for us to live differently. Today, as you look back on your own journey, what will you choose? To continue as before, or to seize the opportunity for renewal, just as Noah did on the summit of Mount Ararat? The answer lies in your hands.